We are so pleased to be joined today by Margaret Salazar for our keynote. Margaret Salazar joined REACH CDC as CEO in October 2023. Margaret is a highly experienced housing executive who has been recognized nationally for her work leading housing policy, finance, and innovation at the national, state, and local level. Margaret comes to REACH from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, where she served as the Northwest Regional Administrator. In this role, Margaret leveraged federal funds to expand best practices for rehousing unsheltered individuals, assisting rural communities in boosting housing supply, and increasing home ownership opportunities for homebuyers of color. Before her recent role at HUD, Margaret served as the Director of Oregon Housing and Community Services. So welcome, Margaret Salazar.
The ceremonial passing of the clicker. Thank you so much, Sam. Good morning, everybody. Are you caffeinated yet? Good morning. I'm thrilled to be with you here this morning, and it was just so exciting to get the invitation to join you. Let me make sure this clicker is working. Yes, here we go. So I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about the need for affordable housing. I know this is something that we all share the commitment to creating affordable housing. I'll talk a little bit about what I've seen out there in my work with communities across the Northwest and nationally and right here in the Portland area. And then now that I've moved to the other side of the table, if you will, as an affordable housing practitioner, I'll share a little bit about what I'm seeing in my day-to-day work at REACH and some ideas about how we can move the conversation forward together. So just grounding us here in the room today, I think you all have heard different statistics about the need for affordable housing supply. There are different ways to look at this issue. But for me, given the trajectory of my work in the housing space and my work in government during the Great Recession, I like to reflect on the fact that we are just about 10 or 12 years out from a massive recession that really shook our financial institutions. I've been spending the week with a lot of bankers at a CRA conference, so I'm thinking a lot about their experience coming out of the Great Recession and thinking about housing finance. And we're really at a time where during that Great Recession period of time, if we can think back to the freeze that we all experienced, we really did not see any housing production to speak of during several years of time, exactly at the time when the Pacific Northwest started attracting a lot of in-migration. So we had a big population increase right at the time when we weren't producing any housing, and that was on top of decades of underinvestment in our housing supply. So in some ways, I see us as still digging out from that experience of just a few years ago. And of course, we've seen during this period of time, racial inequities and housing opportunity continue to expand. So we've got our work cut out for us. And in addition to the statistics, just talking about why this work is important. For those of us that are involved in creating housing, this is a historically challenging time for us, whether it's high interest rates that make financing harder to get, whether it's the expenses for insurance, the expense of land, the competition out there to get housing in the ground, the high operating costs that we're seeing out there. And frankly, I also just want to note the real challenges that our residents continue to face in being able to afford their rent, even years after we're recovering from COVID. These are all historic challenges that are hitting the housing industry. So as policymakers, whether you're working in the land use arena as an attorney, as a financial partner, or as a practitioner, these are all really unique challenges. But at the end of the day, this work can get really, really technical. And at the same time, there are people's lives that are at stake. And I don't want to speak with a lot of hyperbole, but I think we all know that a safe and stable place to call home is absolutely at the center of being able to be successful in this economy and to be able to have successful health outcomes. This is something that to me is very personal. My own mom struggled with housing security. Toward the end of her life, she was fighting cancer. She fell at work, sustained an injury, had to cut back on her hours, and pretty soon mom was served with an eviction notice. And we were all terrified that as she was going through chemotherapy treatments, mom was going to lose her housing at exactly the time when she needed it the most. Now, our family was lucky. We were able to move my mom into senior affordable housing. And thank goodness for that, because what it allowed us to do was focus on mom's health care and not focus on how we were going to scrape together the dollars to help her pay her rent. And it meant that the final years of her life, she got to spend time with her grandchildren, she got to be part of a community, and she got to live her life to the fullest. Unfortunately, that story is not accessible for way too many people in our society. We know that. So when we talk about affordable housing and we talk about all the technical challenges, I want us to remember that people's health and livelihoods are at stake. We talk about housing and healthcare. A lot of us say that housing is healthcare. And at the same time, housing is critical because it helps folks to build that financial stability and intergenerational wealth. If we can get folks into a position of homeownership, we know that it has a huge impact on assets and being able to pass down wealth to future generations. We also know that housing is critical because it's not just about moving folks into housing and housing supply and opening doors. It's about helping people to retain their housing. We hear a lot of conversations about the really intractable challenge of houselessness and homelessness in our community, and we're doing work on that. We can't take our eye off the ball of housing security and housing retention. And so much of the work that we do to create housing opportunities is also around preventing evictions and preventing displacement, not only from homes, but from neighborhoods. And we see, of course, the legacy of gentrification and displacement along color lines in our community as well. And then finally, we know how critical housing is in the fight to address climate change, not only to mitigate the impacts of climate change. As real estate developers and as part of the built environment, we have a responsibility to move our buildings into energy efficiency to reduce the impact on climate. But more and more, we're talking about climate adaptation and talking about making sure that our residents have access to cooling systems and heating systems that are efficient and affordable, and making sure that we are looking at things like indoor air quality as we unfortunately deal with storms and wildfires. So we know that affordable housing is critical, not just for four walls and a door, but because it touches so many other parts of our community and our society. So you heard a little bit about my background. Prior to serving this role, I got the opportunity to travel all across the Northwest, and I've worked nationally, and I've worked also in all parts of Oregon as a state leader, and have had the chance to visit a lot of communities. So what I want to share with you today is the power of alignment. You know, one of the things that is the most challenging thing I see out there is that our affordable housing providers, practitioners, whether it's small community development organizations, local governments, or tribal housing authorities, we're putting the burden on these local organizations to navigate really complex public systems, and in some cases to do it on their own. So I want to give you a couple of examples of what I'm seeing out there and a little bit of a call to action, if you will. I got the chance to travel in Alaska and to engage with tribes that are working on housing supply. I don't know if any of you have ever spent time in Alaska. Good. Okay. So you have a sense for the terrain. This was my first opportunity to spend time in Alaska. It was incredibly humbling. For those of us that think we have challenges in housing production and land use here in Oregon, I encourage you to get on a plane and go up to Alaska. It will shake you when you see what folks are contending with and how difficult it is to get housing in the ground. One of the things I saw in Alaska was that we had tribal housing authorities that were not only being asked to create housing opportunities and to solve for severe overcrowding with their tribal members. We were asking small housing authorities to create the infrastructure needed to get housing in the ground. So not just to create new homeownership opportunities for your tribal members, but figure out how to build a road, build a wastewater treatment system, and make sure that your members have potable water. That is unacceptable. Now that I'm not in the government space, I can say it loud. Government should do better. Government can do better. And it's on our government agencies to make sure that we're aligning housing and infrastructure. Now you can clap. The good news is that I know our government partners are working on this, and I can tell you from that seat, it's not easy to do because we've built systems that silo housing and infrastructure into separate funding streams. They're working on it, but they have the resources now from federal Inflation Reduction Act dollars, infrastructure dollars, and they need to step up and do better. So I'm going to be looking for them to do that. One example I saw on the Oregon coast was we had funding that we were putting out at Oregon Housing Community Services called the LIFT program to help spur affordable housing development. And I got to chatting with a private developer who we had just awarded some dollars to do some development on the coast. And I said, what did it take to get this done? He said, I had to come down from Seattle or Portland every weekend and sit in a diner and talk to the local officials about how we could get infrastructure dollars to get this housing in the ground. I had to convince them to fund the infrastructure for this project. And it took the commitment of an individual taking his weekend time to go down there and cut deals with local folks to get them to fund the infrastructure for the affordable housing that we all need. Again, government, we can do better. So thank you for indulging me in that. I'm very passionate about that. Particularly, I know you're going to be talking about rural housing supply later today. That's where we really see this challenge with infrastructure. And I hope that folks will take up that charge. In in suburban and urban communities, we also have a challenge of alignment. Any of us have been through the permitting process. We're going through some of this now with our friends in Washington County. Everyone is really on board with the idea of housing development, but coordinating the work of land use too often falls on the local developers and the nonprofits to navigate. We need to find a way to help our folks do that work and step up and be their champions. I also want to say a little bit about alignment in the space of addressing homelessness and houselessness. We know that the politics around these issues are supercharged. We all live in this community, we see the headlines. I will tell you, and this is cold comfort, that the Portland metro region is not alone. Having traveled all across the Pacific Northwest, this issue is really eating folks alive all across cities large and small, whether we're talking about Seattle, Spokane, Boise. Folks all across the Pacific Northwest are addressing these issues, and it's a struggle. But the good news is that when we see alignment come together, we can see incredibly powerful things. I saw in inner city, the central city of Seattle, as well in Spokane, some really powerful stories of communities coming together, ignoring the noise of the really difficult politics and rehousing folks. In those two cities, we saw housing providers, service providers, health systems, business leaders, and foundations come together with the express goal of resolving tent encampments for folks that are living unsheltered and outside. And the work is not, there's no magic solution here. It's relentlessly rehousing each individual, meeting them where they're at, and finding the appropriate place to move folks inside and connect them to long-term housing. And when folks come together with that kind of alignment across sectors, it's incredibly powerful. And I hope that folks here in the Portland area will take up that charge. And I hope that you will join me in calling for that as well. That alignment is going to be critical. Thank you. So coming from that perspective of sort of seeing that macro level systems need for alignment, I moved over to the affordable housing development sector. I joined Reach Community Development back in the fall of 2023. As somebody that grew up here in Oregon, I was familiar with Reach. Reach has been one of the longest standing nonprofit housing developers and providers in this community. It's been around for more than 40 years. And we're an organization that's rooted in neighbors helping neighbors and coming together from our roots in Southeast Portland to now serving the three counties in the Portland metro region. Now we steward more than 40 multifamily properties and also folks that are living in single family homes, and we do home repairs and other services for residents. Our work is really about that alignment between housing development, stewarding affordable housing, and providing services to residents. And at the heart of this is really about seeing Reach as being our affordable housing providers as being at the center of that system. We touch the work of houselessness, we touch the work of rental housing, and we touch the work of homeownership. So really understanding the power of these community development organizations as being part of that system. In 2021, during the heart of COVID, REACH engaged in a resident survey opportunity to really get the voices of residents at the center of our work as we mapped out our future goals. And really centering the voices of residents has been critical to the work of REACH over the years. So here's a little bit about what our residents had to say. We invited residents to give us tough feedback on what they'd like to see REACH do better and what we were doing well to meet their needs, and also to share with us their dreams for the future and how residing in REACH housing could be even more of a platform for folks. And here's a little bit about what we heard. Security, safety, and rental increases, even in affordable housing, are huge concerns. Folks were concerned about facing evictions because even affordable rent is still too high for many folks to afford. I see somebody nodding to that. So folks are concerned about being able to afford the rent. Residents want to be more involved in community development work, working with REACH staff and programs, and they're seeing power in what happens in the building and when they come together and participate in service with each other. Most residents indicated that they're looking for programs that will help them build financial security to own a home, start a business, or go back to school. And they're looking for more support to cover basic needs, warm clothes, here you see socks, utilities, food opportunities, retirement, or other savings options. And residents enjoy the location where they live, but they're looking for more options in the state, including places on the coast. We also asked residents to tell us what it would look like if they could design their own home. And we got great feedback. And I'm telling you that we use this feedback when we go into our next development opportunities or when we're looking to do rehab and repair of affordable housing properties. That's the power of a community development organization, is really having the ability to listen to our residents, hear their voices, and center those voices when we do affordable housing development. And you can see a little bit about how that came to fruition in some of our next designs of affordable housing. So where do we go next? As I mentioned, we're in a uniquely challenging time for this sector. I don't want to sugarcoat it. Again, I like to joke, but it's not a joke, that as a policymaker, I was really book smart about the challenges facing the affordable housing industry. And now I see them in real time. And I see the challenges of sustaining our existing housing and building new. But I have a few ideas I want to share with you today. So at REACH, we've sat down and really mapped out where we're focusing our energy this year and into next year. I want to share a little bit about that and how we can all be involved in these goals together. So we continue our work of opening new doors and building new affordable housing. It's not easy, but we have the grit and determination to get it done. We have a pipeline, and our goal is to open 300 new doors to bring them online by the end of next year. We're calling on policymakers and all of you here to keep up the work of streamlining housing approvals to clear the path for housing development. As I said, too much is on the shoulders of nonprofit housing developers to navigate the thicket of approvals and permitting. We would love to be partners with you to help clear that path and get housing in the ground more easily. And we know that the work does not end when we open doors and when we move people into affordable housing. In some ways, that's when the work just really starts beginning. That's why we're so focused on housing retention through our Safe and Stable Homes initiative. I'm going to say this again, a lot of residents are still recovering from the economic ravages of COVID, and too many folks in affordable housing are struggling to keep up with their rents. We're calling on policymakers to understand that challenge, because not only does it threaten the long-term health and stability of affordable housing residents, it threatens our ability to sustain those affordable properties over the long term and make sure that we can continue to operate those properties as safe and stable affordable housing. So will you join me in calling on policymakers to help stabilize our affordable housing? Who's with me? You can do better than that. We've invested too much in these affordable properties, and we've invested too much blood, sweat, and tears to move folks inside out in the cold, to see folks fall back into homelessness, or to see these affordable housing properties fall into disrepair. So we need to partner with you to focus on the long-term stability of these properties. Please don't lose that focus. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of us see housing as healthcare, and we've seen it play out in our own families. We're leaning into that work now more than ever, looking to leverage partnerships with healthcare providers as we're looking at the ability to do Medicaid billing, which will really be a game changer for affordable housing to help us pay for the ongoing operations and services. One of the things that we're seeing in our sector, and I know you've heard this before, is that lots of folks are moving into affordable housing with a higher acuity of needs than we've seen before. Often we have, designated housing as permanent supportive housing, which has been really a specialized kind of housing. But for those of us in the affordable housing sector, a lot of what we're doing now is de facto permanent supportive housing. Folks have a lot of service needs. We're really looking to step more into that work, expand our work in permanent supportive housing, and to find ways to partner with our friends in the healthcare sector to do just that. Our call to action here for policymakers is we are telling them we have affordable housing units available. We have a stock of affordable housing. We can create permanent supportive housing for you very quickly if you will cite services dollars and rental assistance dollars into affordable housing. We can better serve our residents, we can help them retain our housing, and we can really live out that ethic of housing as healthcare. Will you join me in calling on policymakers to pair services and rental assistance and affordable housing? Who's with me? Thank you. Now, on the climate front, we have a history and a legacy at Reach of being innovators in the work of energy efficient housing and climate friendly housing. We're going to continue to drive that work. And the work today is not just about new units, but it's about rehabbing the existing affordable housing that's already in place and making sure that we are harnessing federal dollars that are on the street right now for climate adaptation, as well as the Portland Clean Energy Fund. So we're going to be looking at ways that we can green our portfolio, improve energy efficiency, lower utility costs for residents, and connect residents with things like air conditioners in our heating environment. So we're excited about that climate work, and we hope to partner with you on that as well. And then the final piece that we want to talk about is home buying opportunities. We are increasingly seeing that our residents, again, are looking to save for homeownership opportunities. And we're looking at ways that we can help position our residents to save for homeownership and connect them with home buying opportunities. Reach actually owns a portfolio of single family homes, and we've been proud to do that. That's part of our roots as a community development organization. We're starting to look at ways that we might be able to reposition those single family homes to get them in the hands of first-time home buyers, in particular home buyers of color, and to partner with housing counseling agencies. So we're excited about expanding that work as well. All right, yes, thank you. So I just want to leave you with a few thoughts here. As I mentioned, it's been humbling coming over to this side of the table as an affordable housing developer, having been a policymaker. It's going to take all of us leading from every chair, no matter what role you play in this system, to expand safe and stable affordable housing across our region to meet our needs. And that means being bold in our vision, pushing for that alignment between systems, centering resident voices and centering racial equity, and taking initiative to try new things. Affordable housing providers like Reach are at the center of the system. We have to talk financial, we have to talk land use, we have to talk houselessness, we have to talk Medicaid. We have a lot of different languages that we need to speak. We're up for that challenge because we see ourselves in the center of the system. For practitioners who are in the audience today, I would just leave you with this. You have the attention of policymakers. They're looking to us for answers. Let's show them how it's done. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. And I think we have time for a few questions, if anybody has any questions for me this morning.
Thank you so much again, Margaret Salazar. If anyone has any questions in the audience, we have a Q&A mic. It's going to be right here for the duration of the conference. So if there's any questions, feel free to come on up to the mic.
Excellent.
Hi, my name is Jill Kropp. I'm an architect and I do a lot of middle housing. Some of it is affordable. So I also share your feeling that infrastructure is often a barrier, especially for the smaller projects that I'm doing that are maybe like 4 to 12 units. I'm working in the city of Portland. So do you have any suggestions for how I might advocate the tight, sort of the tight hold on developers paying for all of the infrastructure in every situation?
Yeah, thanks for that question about how to navigate the infrastructure challenges. So I'm not an expert in sort of making the pitch for infrastructure, but what I will say as a general comment is policymakers and elected officials are always looking for a win, just generally, right? They wake up in the morning looking for a win. And I think the more that we can frame our work as creating a solution and an opportunity and a win, the more successful we are. So if we can find ways to pilot things, and they also love pilots, because and honestly, sometimes you can get things through the bureaucracy as a pilot that you can't do as a big policy shift. So I would say just generally that would be my advice, is if you can find a way to carve out an exception, demonstrate success, show proof of concept, and sort of package it as a win for the policymakers, that's usually the most helpful approach.
Hello,
Hi, good morning.
my name is Shane. I work with Portland Neighbors Welcome, the LGBTQ Housing Collaborative in Multnomah County, and I'm also sitting on the ONA Rules Making Advisory Committee. I'm hearing, of course, over the many decades, we've had underbuilding of housing. That's an issue, systemic. Rising interest rates, systemic. Historical lack of intergenerational wealth, systemic. Discrimination, systemic, right? Cool. All these things make it more difficult for furthering the supply of housing. And of course, it relates to the rising cost per the square footage of land.
Yeah.
In relation to that, of course, there's desire from people who may move here, maybe that have more income than the average Portlander, right? That's just a growing city. I've learned to not cast aspersions or projections at that. But in the last 2 years, there have been more and more reports of algorithmic technologies and REITs that are utilizing programs such as Yield Star, RealPage, and there are many states that are taking them to task. We must remember that the CEO, the creator of this program, was also involved in the Alaska Airlines crisis in the early aughts, where it showed you are artificially raising the prices because of collusion. With rising interest rates, it seems it's not small and mid-sized developers who have most access to our land. It's people who are not tied to our community, who have more money than sense and morals. How are we going to insert our ability to usurp our own authority from people who are investing in land, creating artificial demand for people who will never live here, and are essentially utilizing our community as a land bank for their bank accounts?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. Well, so first I would just say, like, AI, I find incredibly terrifying, just on a personal level. That's just me when I'm laying in bed at night. And I'd say the first thing is, we as a nonprofit sector need to figure out a way to harness AI. And so that doesn't answer your question, but I'll get to that. But I would just say, we have to figure out a way that we can be more innovative. Like, talk about alignment. I mean, our sector has done some work to reduce barriers to get people into housing. There's still a lot of bureaucracy there. There's still too much paperwork and waiting lists and challenges that folks have to navigate our system. You shouldn't have to get on 20 different waiting lists. So I know there are folks working on tech solutions, and I think that might be one opportunity, is just even level the playing field so that we're making it easier for folks to get into housing opportunities.
And one other observation, because when you said affordable rents are not affordable, when the affordable rent is based on the average median income and rising wealth
Yes.
inequality, who is that serving? And is that too high of a bar to jump? So, oh, I'm in poverty, just not enough poverty, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you definitely hear that. On the issue of folks buying up property, so this is something we've actually seen nationally, of course, is investors and overseas investors buying up single family homes and turning them into rental housing. That's and really whittling down our housing stock in that regard. And what we've seen is some of the policymakers, like at HUD, for example, were responding by when they have troubled asset sales, they're prioritizing the sales to nonprofits, municipalities, and land trusts. So we're seeing some policy shift there, but that is a drop in the bucket to the overall housing availability. That's one of the reasons why we're looking at our own housing stock and thinking about if we do asset sales to find a way to match them up with first-time home buyers of color coming through housing counseling agencies. So there are some examples of that on the margin that don't get to the larger issue, but I think also leveling the playing field to get some of that technology into our hands and find ways to be creative with that work is one opportunity that we have to be able to do that. I'll also just say one other thing, and this is a little controversial, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. Yeah. I saw that. Yes. So, rental vacancies, residential rental vacancies are higher in Portland now than they were, over recent years. I want to be clear, that does not solve our housing crisis or our affordability crisis. But we should acknowledge that. I was at I saw an economic forecast, and it stated that the downtown residential vacancy, again, for all residential, not affordable, is 9%. So that has a lot to do with our central city and recovering from, the impacts of the last few years. But what an opportunity. What an opportunity to think creatively. Instead of ignoring that, let's lean into that, try to figure out what's causing that, and try to figure out how we could repurpose some of those homes, how we could buy some of that property, how we could move folks in that are experiencing homelessness, how we might be able to buy down the rents to make it affordable for folks. So those are just a few of the things I think we need to be open to, and it challenges what we think we know about our housing sector, but we need to take in that new information.
And then side note, my partner lives at close to Providence Park. If there's a 9% vacancy rate, yet there are 15% rent increases, that's not supply and demand. That is not capitalism. That is not an invisible hand. It is a visible hand that slaps us. And you're telling that with that vacancy rate that's also affecting small business owners, that creates a dead space with no community eyes on the ground. So it's less safe, there's more opportunity, and it's more expensive, but we can access it. What's the problem here? It should be housing, not a plate of spaghetti.
All right, that's a good mic drop moment to end the session. Thanks for spending time with me this morning and having me. I really appreciate it. Look forward to partnering and working with all of you. Thanks, everybody.